The Walt Disney Company CEO Bob Iger recently claimed that the notion that Disney is in any way sexualizing our children, quite frankly, is preposterous and inaccurate. This is going to be a lengthy video, so hopefully you stay with me through the entire thing. I'm going to go through all of Bob Iger's comments that he made in a recent interview with CNBC, and we're going to go through some of the evidence that shows everything he's saying is an absolute total lie. It is complete bunk. So let's go through this here. Let's start with this. So at one point during the interview, this again, he's doing an interview with CNBC during an appearance at the Sun Valley Conference in Idaho. But at one point during the interview, the CNBC host, whose name is David Faber, asked, "What about Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who is going to be on the hustings, so to speak, for the next year? And he's made this part of his campaign, attacking Disney, saying it's a woke corporation." He then quoted DeSantis saying, "We put the company on a pedestal, but they've really embraced the idea of getting the sexualized content in the program line that I'm not really to cross." I mean, that's what he said. I quoted DeSantis there. How do you respond to that? Iger said, "So far, what we've said publicly is that we are concerned that he has decided to retaliate against the company for the position the company took on pending legislation in that state. And frankly, the company was within its right, even though I'm not sure it was handled very well. It was within its right to speak up on an issue constitutionally protected right of free speech, and to retaliate against the company in a way that would be harmful to the business was not something that we could sit back and tolerate. So we have filed a lawsuit to protect our First Amendment rights there and to protect our business, frankly." So just for some clarity there, they have filed a lawsuit, a federal lawsuit, but the state of Florida has also filed a lawsuit against the Walt Disney Company and Bob Iger as well. The other issues that you referenced, look, the last thing that I want for the company is for the company to be drawn into any culture wars, Iger said. I know there's like lots of things I could talk about here, but I do just want to kind of keep going here. "You know, we've operated for almost 100 years as a company making product that we are actually proud of it in terms of its impact on the world. You know, I joke every once in a while that we're there to manufacture fun. We're there to tell great stories." CNBC's Faber then interjected and brought up, I guess 4 or 5 people that were carrying Nazi flags protesting outside of Disney parks. And he said, "You can't be happy when there's literally Nazis standing outside the front gates of the park." Iger reacted and said, "That was horrifying, quite frankly, and it is concerning to me that anyone would encourage a level of intolerance or even hate that, frankly, could even become dangerous action that could be turned into some dangerous act of some sort. So it's concerning to me, but I don't want to really engage in the specifics except to say that it's not our goal to be involved in a culture war." Again, he said this twice now. We will get to this. This is not true. "Our goal is to continue to tell wonderful stories and have a positive impact on the world. You know, we are a preeminent entertainer in the world, and we are proud of our track record there. The notion that," here's the main quote here, "the notion that Disney is in any way sexualizing our children, quite frankly, is preposterous and inaccurate." So he then was asked if he was going to escalate his engagement with the state of Florida, and he says, "We are going to keep doing what we do best and be proud of what we are doing and be mindful of the environment, of course. I said this publicly. We are sensitive to the interests and the needs of the great audiences we are seeking to attract globally, and we will continue to do that." So it's interesting. It will be interesting. Unfortunately, Faber didn't ask who these audiences are that they are trying to attract that are global. It would have been nice to know who he's actually trying to attract, because it does not seem like he's actually doing that. Again, we have a report in the Wall Street Journal just this week saying that park attendance is down in this same CNBC interview that I'm not really going to get into here. He seems to admit that park attendance is down at Walt Disney World in Florida. Clearly, we're seeing declines at Disney Plus. Their box office revenues are massively declining. Their return on investments are negative at the box office. Things are all trending downward at the Walt Disney Company. So it is interesting it would be interesting to know who these global audiences are that he's trying to attract. But nevertheless, let's get to unpacking what Bob Iger had to say here. In my opinion, he's doing a ton of damage control, and the company is indeed attempting to indoctrinate children into heinous and evil ideologies such as transgenderism, as well as attempting to sexualize them with content programming, movies, TV shows, etc., focused on sexual orientation and gender identity. I think they do that across the board. That's on Disney Plus. That's on Freeform. That's in the news programming that they do on ABC. That's in their reporting on sports at ESPN. I think that they're doing this across the board. This is a company mandate. If it's not a mandate, it's completely part of the company culture, and they do it in everything that they do. So the company's position was made abundantly clear when they came out against the pending legislation, which Iger references. Notice how he never tells you what the legislation is when he talks about it. He's just like, there was legislation. Well, that legislation was the Florida's Parental Rights and Education Bill that is now law. And in that bill that Disney eventually opposed, it said that classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3 or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. This is what they were opposing. They were opposing classroom instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity for kids in kindergarten through 3rd grade. The Walt Disney Company was opposing a banning of that. That's what they were doing. This is the legislation that he's talking about here. And then before they even came out and opposed it, we had the former CEO, Bob Chapek, sent out an email explaining why he was going to try and keep the company out of it. But his explanation on why he was keeping the company out of it is because they were going to circumvent bills such as this one in Florida and others in other states with content programming. This is what he said. He said, because this struggle is much bigger than any one bill in any one state. I believe the best way for our company to bring about lasting change is through the inspiring content we produce, the welcoming culture we create, and the diverse community organizations we support. There's a reason content is at the top of this list. For nearly a century, our company's stories have opened minds, inspired dreams, shown the world both as it is and how we wish it could be, and now more than ever before represent the incredible diversity of our society. We are telling important stories, raising voices, and I believe changing hearts and minds. So they're clearly trying to change people's hearts and minds, and they're trying to do it to circumvent laws like this that are banning sexual orientation and gender identity. So what does that mean? Whose minds are you trying to change? What are you trying to change their minds into? It looks like you're trying to change their minds to favor a sexual orientation ideology and gender identity ideology. I don't think you can really talk your way out of this, Bob Iger. This is what your former CEO said. Less than a week after publicly claiming the company would not get involved in the legislation, Chapek changed course, said that he would completely align the company behind opposition to the bill. This is what he said in another email. It is clear that it's not just an issue about a bill in Florida, but instead yet another challenge to basic human rights. You needed me to be a stronger ally in the fight for equal rights, and I let you down. I am sorry. The guy's groveling about trying to protect kids from being indoctrinated into these evil ideologies. This is the former CEO of the Walt Disney Company. Are you kidding me? He continues saying, starting immediately, we are increasing our support for advocacy groups to combat similar legislation in other states. So he's literally funding this stuff. He's admitting that they were going to start funding opposition to this bill and to other bills like it. We are hard at work creating a new framework for our political giving that will ensure our advocacy better reflects our values. And today we are pausing all political donations in the state of Florida pending this review. So don't get it confused. When he's saying that they were pausing political donations and then also saying that they're going to be increasing support for advocacy groups, those are different things. The political advocacy he's talking about is specifically donations to politicians and their PACs. The advocacy groups are to groups like Glisten and GLAAD and etc. that are literally trying to promote this stuff to children and are influencing not just the Walt Disney Company, but all of these studios throughout Hollywood and across the world, because they're obviously doing it in other locales as well now. And then at the end of the email, he said, I missed the mark in this case, but I'm an ally you can count on, and I will be an outspoken champion for the protections, visibility, and opportunity you deserve. Notice how he doesn't want to be a champion for the children that the bill was trying to protect. He wants to be the champion for the people opposing the bill. Very sick stuff here. Very sick. Following these emails, the Walt Disney Company would host a Reimagine Tomorrow conference for its employees where numerous executives revealed just how they were sexualizing children. So if you're unfamiliar with Reimagine Tomorrow, it's literally a program, part of Disney's like DEI department, where they're literally trying to change the face of the culture and the company's culture and everything like that through quote unquote diversity initiatives. During this conference, president of Disney General Entertainment Content, Carrie Burke, detailed how important it was for her to have, quote, many LGBTQIA characters in our stories because she's the mother of transgender and pansexual children. Like, this is what she said. I'm here as a mother of 2 queer children, actually 1 transgender child and 1 pansexual child, and also as a leader. And that was the thing that really got me, because I've heard so much from so many of my colleagues over the course of the last couple of weeks in open forums and through emails and phone conversations. I feel a responsibility to speak, not just for myself, but for them. That is up to all of us. We had an open forum last week at 20th. She's talking about 20th Century studios, where Disney bought Fox, and they've taken it over. We're again the home of really incredible groundbreaking LGBTQIA stories over the years, where one of our execs stood up and said, we only had a handful of queer leads in our content. And I went, what? That can't be true. And I realized, it actually is true. We have many LGBTQIA characters in our stories, and yet we don't have enough leads and narratives in which gay characters just get to be characters and not have to be about gay stories. That's been very eye-opening for me. I can tell you something that I feel that perhaps had this moment not happened, I as a leader and me as my colleagues would not have focused on going forward. I certainly will be more so. I know that we will be, and I hope this is a moment where, 50% of the tears, are coming. We just don't allow each other to go backwards. So she's clearly going to be promoting this stuff in kids programming, adult programming, and all kinds of programming, clearly trying to indoctrinate children and I think susceptible adults as well into sexual orientation, gender ideology, propaganda. We then had Disney production coordinator Alan March went on to reveal that the company created a tracker in order to determine whether or not the company was creating enough LGBTQ plus characters. This is what March said. I've had the privilege of working with the Moon Girl team. This is Moon Girl right here. You can see this image here. It is specifically aimed at children. For the last 2 years, they've been really open to exploring queer stories. I'm on the production side. Part of the work that I feel like I can put in is making sure that we take place in modern day New York, so making sure that's an accurate reflection of New York. So I put together a tracker of our background characters to make sure that we have the full breadth of expression. We got into a very similar conversation, Carrie, of like, all of our gender non-conforming characters are in the background. So it's not just a numbers game of how many LGBTQ plus characters you have. The more centered a story is on a character, the more nuanced you get into their story. So they're literally trying to center stories for children based on characters that they are making into queer and LGBTQ plus characters to promote that to children. Especially with trans characters, if you can't see if someone is trans, there's not one way to look trans. So kind of the only way to have these canonical trans characters, canonical asexual, canonical bisexual characters, is to give them stories where they can be their whole self. So there you go. It's clearly trying to push that stuff into children's programming. Again, Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, it is a children's program right there. You can see a screenshot right there. Then we had Vivian Ware, Disney's diversity and inclusion manager at Walt Disney Parks and Resorts. She admitted that they were removing gendered greetings from their parks. She said, last summer, we removed all of the gendered greetings in relationship to our live spiels. So we no longer say ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We provided training for all of our cast members in relation to that. So now they know it's hello, everyone, or hello, friends. Clear indoctrination, trying to blur the lines between men and women. Sick stuff here. She continued saying, we're in the process of changing over those recorded messages, and so many of you are probably familiar when we brought the fireworks back to the Magic Kingdom, we no longer say ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We say dreamers of all ages. So I love the fact that it's opened up the creativity, the opportunity for our cast members to look at that. We have our cast members working with merchandise, working with food and beverage, working with all of our guest-facing areas where perhaps we want to create that magical moment with our cast members, with our guests. So everything is in this right here. Like, that's what she's saying. It's throughout the entire park system. They are trying to remove the distinction between boys and girls, men and women. It's just absolutely wrong. That there are men and there are women, and they are different. Like, that is a truth. You cannot deny it. Well, you can try and deny it, but that doesn't take away from the truth of the matter. You can deny it as much as you want, but that truth is still there. It's still constant. She then added, and we don't want to just assume because someone might be, in our interpretation, maybe presenting as female, that they may not want to be called princess. So let's think differently about how we really engage with our guests in a meaningful and inclusive way that makes it magical and memorable for everyone. And then this is probably the most egregious one here, LaToya Ravenel, who has since been promoted at the company and now is like a director instead of just a producer for Disney television animation, where she actually revealed that she was putting in a, quote, not at all secret gay agenda into the children's programs she worked on. This is what she had to say. I love Disney's content. I grew up watching all of the classics. They have been a huge informative part of my life. But at the same time, like, I worked at small studios most of my career, and I'd heard, you hear whispers. I'd heard things like, they won't let you show this in a Disney show. And I'm like, okay, so I was a little like sus when I started, but then my experience was bafflingly the opposite of what I had heard. In my little pocket of proud family Disney TVA, the showrunners were super welcoming. Meredith Roberts and our leadership over there has been so welcoming to my not at all secret gay agenda. So she's literally telling us that she's putting in a secret gay agenda into, or not at all secret gay agenda into children's programming. Again, This is what the show is right here. Screenshot aimed at children. Maybe it was that way in the past, but I guess something must have happened in the last. They're turning around. They're going hard, and then like all that momentum that I felt, that sense of I don't have to be afraid to have these two characters kiss in the background. I was just wherever I could, just basically adding queerness. You see anything queer in the show, no one would stop me, and no one was trying to stop me. So she's clearly trying to put that in children's shows to try and normalize that type of behavior. That type of behavior is not normal. It is disordered. So I think it's very clear that the Walt Disney Company is indeed sexualizing children, and they are not being secretive about it. Ironically, Bob Iger also noted he had no intention of changing the company's position on these matters when he returned as CEO. He hosted a town hall for Disney employees where he said, I think there's a misperception here about what politics is. I think that some of the subjects that have proven to be controversial as it relates to Disney have been branded political, and I don't necessarily believe they are. I actually might kind of tacitly agree with that. I don't think that they're really political issues. I think they're moral issues, and our society is so bankrupt morally that they've become political issues, because you have an entire side of the political aisle that does not believe in true morality. They believe in immorality. They think that immorality is actually moral, and it's sick and disgusting. And Bob Iger here, I think, is kind of playing word games with this. He's obviously not thinking the way I'm thinking when he's saying this. He doesn't think that this stuff is controversial. He doesn't think it's political either. He thinks he thinks he's one of these people that thinks that the immorality is moral. He says, I don't think that when you are telling stories and attempting to be a good citizen of the world, that's political. It's just not how I view it. There you have it. He wants to be a good citizen of the world. What does that even mean? No, you shouldn't be worldly. As a Christian, we are actively oppose being of the world. We live in the world, but we are not of the world. And this guy's literally saying he wants to be of the world. I mean, he's telling you what he is and what his values are. He goes on and says, do I like the company being embroiled in controversy? Of course not. It can be distracting, and it can have a negative impact on the company. And to the extent that I can work to quiet things down, I'm going to do that. Right there. He's trying to quiet things down. He realizes he has a PR problem on his hand, and he wants to quiet it down, but he's not saying that he's going to change what they're doing. Very key there. But I think it's important to put in perspective what some of these subjects are and not just simply brand them as political. Yes, that's true. They are moral issues, and you have chosen the wrong side of this moral issue, Bob Iger. When he was specifically asked about the Parental Rights Act in Florida, he said, well, first of all, our LGBTQ employees are very important to us and we care deeply about them. That is a given. Secondly, this company has been telling stories for 100 years, and those stories have had a meaningful, positive impact on the world. One of the reasons that they've had a meaningful, positive impact is one of our core values is inclusion, acceptance, and tolerance, and we can't lose that. We just can't lose that. So he's there confirming that they are going to continue doing this. Everything that we just heard from those Reimagine Tomorrow people, he's saying we can't lose that. We just can't lose that. So this guy knows what the company's doing. He knows exactly what's going on, and he bald-faced lied about it in that CNBC interview. And then as for let's address this First Amendment claim as well that he made, that he's being persecuted by Ron DeSantis. So we actually have a legal analyst here, Andrew Esquire. He recently appeared on the WDW Pro channel and was giving his expertise, his legal expertise on the lawsuits that the Walt Disney Company has filed and that they are facing from Florida. And he believes that like they don't have any standing. Like he does not think that First Amendment claim holds up whatever. This is what he says here. He says, the reason cited, one of the main reasons, which I have said from the beginning on this, which is Disney does not truly have standing. They do not meet the elements for standing. Standing means the ability to bring a claim to court. So he doesn't even think they have any standing on this First Amendment claim. He thinks that it's complete PR and it's Bob Iger trying to manipulate the media to run cape for him, even though it really doesn't have anything to do with the actual lawsuit that they filed or the counter suit that was the state of Florida filed against him and the Walt Disney Company. But Esquire goes on and elaborates, says, this is exactly the reason that the citizens who actually sued the state of Florida for these legislative changes way back earlier this year, they were thrown out for standing. Disney also can be thrown out for much similar grounds. So they're very likely to be tossed out, if not entirely almost all of the counts. So perhaps 4 of the counts might get tossed. You might have 1 remaining count there in federal court. And if you watch the whole video, which I do recommend, he does note that the entire First Amendment thing is like bunk. And if you read their actual lawsuit, their like 77-page lawsuit, the First Amendment claim is at the bottom. So even the Walt Disney Company's like legal like lawyers put it at the bottom, noting that it's like kind of not the most important point that they're trying to make in their lawsuit.